let me introduce you to what Emanuel calls the complete lives system. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a well-thought-out plan for healthcare, and it is, so long as you're prepared to have your whole existence dictated by a top-down government apparatus. Back in 2009, Dr. Emanuel wrote an academic paper for The Lancet, the premier health journal published out of the UK. The headline, Principles for Allocation of Scarce Medical Interventions. This paper became the basis for Obamocare. It also outlined the ultimate goal of single payer. The system demands that almost every individual submit themselves wholly to a treatment curve that sees infants to preteens as essentially worthless. And after the age range of 41 to 75, you'll first see a decrease in available treatment resources. Then you'll ultimately be cut off. That's not possible, advocates of government-run healthcare would say. Well, here's the good doctor in his own words saying we must invest in the children.
We don't invest in kids as much as we should. We need to invest in them more, whether it's early childhood education, it's better programs at school, it's identifying kids who have reading disabilities and other problems, it's providing mental health to kids who have stress and very abusive situations. I think investing in our kids, absolutely critical.
Who disagrees? The children are our future, right? They always start with something we all agree upon. But who would believe that really the system only views kids as nothing more than potential pawns for the system itself? Well, here's a simple graph of Emanuel's own design. I'm not making this stuff up. Starting at the beginning of the curve, you could see it right there. The complete life system, quotes, supports modifying the youngest first principle by prioritizing adolescents and young adults over infants. Adolescents have received substantial education and parental care, investments that will be wasted without a complete life. Infants, by contrast, have not yet received these investments. Similarly, adolescence brings with it a developed personality capable of forming and valuing long-term plans whose fulfillment requires a complete life. Well, what that means is the system will center itself around how treating the individual will benefit the individual's ability to contribute to the system that runs life from cradle to the grave. So, I don't mean to be dark here, but according to that, what's a baby's life worth? Well, the answer, nothing. I mean, you may think your babies are cute and you may love them and all, but they have no value when juxtaposed to a society where the government monopolizes all services and requires total submission. In other words, life, your baby's life, you're not living for your own sake. Now let's go to the other side of the curve. And I'm not making this stuff up. This is all right there in black and white. Quote, the complete lives system is complete in another way. It incorporates each morally relevant, simple principle. When implemented, the complete lives system produces a priority curve on which individuals aged roughly between 15 and 40 years get the most substantial chance, whereas the youngest and oldest people get chances that are attenuated. So beginning at the age of 41, the system will begin withholding resources as the individual is now seen on the decline of the curve. Forget this whole idea. Get this out of your head that you're going to pay into the system for your own benefit, that when you need the system the most, it'll be there for you. You are literally being told to die before you become a burden to the elites who will run the system. Now add in the open border. Newly arrived young people will be given priority over citizens who are over the age of 41, and there'll be millions of them. That's not hyperbole. If the left succeeds, taxes will have to go up and services will ever more be redistributed based on the model I just outlined. By this standard, Joe Biden shouldn't be receiving any treatments going forward. But they'll say he's going to be the president. Elites and insiders will demand that you, the little people, simply accept the premise that they are more valuable while they lecture on about equality. Right, the system will treat you equally. equal misery for everyone. That is how it would work. According to this helpful section, here it goes, titled Promoting and Rewarding Social Usefulness. Quote, unlike the previous values, social value cannot direct allocation on its own. Rather, social value allocation prioritizes specific individuals to enable them to promote other important values or rewards them for having promoted these values, unquote. So, there you have it. Basically, Emanuel does what all authoritarians do. They design a carve-out so the rulers of the state do not have to subject themselves to their own regulations. At this point, you and I would no longer be citizens of a republic. We would be subjects of a dystopian, authoritarian regime that condemns us to a life of servitude. The system will gift you health services for your most productive years. What that means is, as long as you're producing for the system will make sure that you can function for the system. This is kind of how a rancher looks at cattle, right? The rancher will only invest in veterinary services so long as the head of cattle has value to the ranch. Once a cow can no longer breed or produce milk, it's put out to pasture. We're slaughtered. I know, right? Dark. Let me veer off for a minute here and demonstrate the lineage, the long line of thinking. The Fabian socialists in England, founded in 1884, are the inspiration for today's democratic socialists. Their mantra is educate, agitate, organize. Here it is from their own website. The Fabian Society derives its name from the Roman general Quintus Fabius, known as Cunctator, from his strategy of delaying his attacks on the invading Carthaginians until the right moment. The name Fabian Society was explained in the first Fabian pamphlet, which carried the note, quote, for the right moment, you must wait, as Fabius did, most patiently, when warring against Hannibal, though many censured his delays, but when the time comes, you must strike hard, as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless, unquote. Their stated goals are to lie and wait for the offer of a perfect moment to move society toward their agenda, like a pandemic. Here, and this is shocking, is their most famous spokesperson, George Bernard Shaw, on how a healthcare system should work. Now, before I play this, think of Emanuel's curve and the provision of societal value.
You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social vote, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us and it can't be of very much use to yourself.
He just verbalized Emanuel's life curve. Now, Emanuel vehemently denies there's a plan for top-down, single-payer, authoritarian health care here.
Single payer is not going to happen. And it's just a fact of political life. I like to remind people, I think I reminded people in my prepared remarks, we barely passed the Affordable Care Act. Okay? If you think you're going to pass single payer, let me invite you to Washington and I'll take you around the halls of Congress. There is no chance, no way, no how. Just not happening. And I don't think the Affordable Care Act, despite what some people have said, is a surreptitious way to get to single payer. That's also not happening. Let's just play it out. What do we get out of the Affordable Care Act? We have a marketplace where competition among private companies offering insurance, and soon there are these, like Kaiser, there are these integrated delivery systems. Subsidies to people to buy that private insurance. That is not single payer. It is not a government takeover of healthcare. It's a vigorous marketplace with competitors offering products that people get to choose from. We would need some major hiccup along the way, collapse of some private insurers or no offerings that are not reasonable or desirable by people to, I think, have a major shift. And I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, because now the left is cool on the big insurers. But wait. If the government is giving people money to buy the insurance and then choosing the insurers that could sell the insurance and then subsidizing the sale, you could see how the lie and wait approach has worked, right? We're moving in that direction. This has worked versus taking the system whole in one motion. Now, the pandemic of 2020, that hiccup, has given them the final piece they seek. Last clip, one more. Look, buddy Americans, you might be last in line in the world to get the vaccine, should you want to take it, that was developed with support from President Trump's Operation Warp Speed and paid for with your tax dollars.
Vaccine nationalism, it's called, keeping the vaccine for my country, is a natural response. Governments are responsible for the freedom and well-being of their citizens. But there's a limit to what they should do, and there's also some obligation to the world. If the whole world is suffering, your country's not going to get better, as New Zealand has shown us, if everyone else has a lot of COVID. It'll come back into your country. So we have obligations beyond our borders, too. So what we have proposed is that we actually, countries can have enough vaccine to get the transmission rate in their country down, but then they really do have an obligation to release vaccine into the world. And then the question is how you distribute it.
Understand, you might be last in line, but the overlords are not going to skip one dose. So here's the argument. This man is the epitome of the left's plans for America. He says we should accept our fate by 75. We should all be prepared to meet our end, say our goodbyes. I don't know, why not just issue a permanent sleeping pill at midnight of 75 years? And yet, there's Emanuel by the side of a man who is perhaps going to be the oldest person in American history to be inaugurated at the age of 78. Gone is the talk of being a burden or in decline or feeble. No more worries about octogenarians being robbed of creativity and ability to contribute to work, society, and the world. Nope, we're putting that guy in charge of everything. I thought the left was insisting on masks and lockdowns so we could save grandma, yet they choose him for the coronavirus task force. I don't know. I'm getting some mixed messages here. Could it be they're not telling us the whole truth, not being upfront with us? Emanuel's beliefs could literally be the plot of a dystopian sci-fi novel, believing that certain members of society are more worthy of living past 75 or receiving medical care. That's exactly what socialism is. For thee, not me. Socialism's for the people, not the socialist. Then there are your kids. According to Dr. Death's plan, your children have no value until they can propagate the system. People like Emanuel are creating the blueprints for the America that the left has always dreamed of and the conservatives have always feared. The system, as foreseen by the socialists now running the Democratic Party, has always been sold on the promise of a new outcome or a new equality. But it always fails the same way. The elites who fail the society never suffer the consequences alongside the commoner. They inevitably separate themselves from those they doomed. In our case, the citizen, keyword, will be cast down into the new masses driven by the open border. You, them, it's all the same. Who cares if you worked hard, maybe served in the military, and paid into the system? You see, they've got big plans, and progress cannot be held up for your tiny, selfish views on life and liberty.